Hey everyone, and welcome. Ever wonder where psychology really started? Like way before therapy and all the experiment?
Oh yeah, it goes way back.
Well, today we're going deep, like ancient Greece deep, to see how those early thinkers tackled the mysteries of the mind. And guess what? It's surprisingly relevant even now.
You'd be amazed how much they got right just by thinking things through.
We're diving into some classic psychology textbooks, which I know sounds a little dry, but trust me, this stuff is fascinating.
It's like a treasure hunt for the origins of ideas we take for granted today.
Okay, picture it ancient Greece, a time historians call the Greek miracle. Why was this period such a big deal?
Well, there was this explosion of intellectual energy, philosophers, mathematicians, astronomers, doctors. They were all pushing the boundaries of knowledge. It wasn't just about specializing. They were searching for those connections between everything.
Like Thales, right. The guy who believed everything was basically water. I mean, can you imagine trying to explain that at a party?
Right. But it shows that they were already trying to find that one fundamental principle that could explain the whole universe.
It's pretty ambitious. So that brings us to psyche, the root of psychology. We know it roughly means soul or mind, but what were these ancient thinkers really trying to figure out?
It goes deeper than just a word. They were wrestling with what makes us, us. What's the nature of thought, feeling, experiencing the world? And not just in a spiritual way, but as a core part of our existence.
And those same questions are still driving psychology today.
Amazing, right? But hold on, things are about to get interesting. We're heading into a philosophical showdown. Plato versus Aristotle.
A classic rivalry that shaped the entire Western world. Their different takes on knowledge are crucial to understanding how psychology developed.
All right, let's start with Plato. He was all about those ideal forms, right? Like this perfect, unchanging reality beyond our senses. Almost like saying the world we see is a cheap copy. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Plato believed that real knowledge came from within, through reasoning about those ideal forms. He even said we're like prisoners in a cave, only seeing shadows of true reality. What do you think that means for how we understand the mind?
Whoa, so maybe our senses aren't that reliable after all.
Yeah.
If true knowledge comes from inside, then maybe looking inward is the key to understanding ourselves.
That's a huge idea that still resonates today. How much of what we believe comes from our perceptions and how much is already there?
Then there's Aristotle, taking a completely different approach. He was all about observation and categorizing. While Plato was deep in thought, Aristotle was out there getting his hands dirty.
Exactly. He was a true naturalist, classifying hundreds of plants and animals. That emphasis on observing the world through our senses, that's basically the foundation of the scientific method. And get this, he even came up with the scale of nature, ranking organisms from simple to complex, almost like he was hinting at evolution centuries before Darwin.
So Plato, the champion of innate knowledge, versus Aristotle, the master of experience. Two totally different paths to understanding the world. What does that tell us about how ideas develop over time?
It shows this constant tension between nature and nurture, between what we're born with and what we learn. And that debate is still going strong in psychology today. Where do you think human exceptionalism fits in all this?
Yeah, it makes you think about our place in the grand scheme of things, right? Are we truly unique or just a more complex part of nature?
And it's fascinating. A lot of this ancient knowledge didn't stay in Europe. It traveled east to the Islamic world during their golden age.
Right. Scholars there preserved and even built on those Greek texts.
It was a period of incredible intellectual exchange.
And we have people like Al-Kindi to thank for that, don't we? He played a big role in making those Indo-Arabic numerals, 1, 2, 3 popular.
Absolutely. Without his work making those numbers accessible, math and science would have developed so differently.
It's mind-blowing how something as simple as numbers can have such a huge impact.
You're telling me. Think about it. They were the foundation for more complex calculations, which eventually led to statistics, quantitative research, essential to modern psychology.
Wow, it's all connected. But Al-Kindi wasn't the only one making waves during the Islamic Golden Age, was he?
Not at all. Avicenna, a brilliant doctor and philosopher, wrote extensively on medicine a.d. the mind. He even used thought experiments to grapple with consciousness and perception, kind of like Plato's cave allegory.
Oh, you're talking about that floating man thought experiment, right? Where
Yeah.
a person has no senses and can't move. I remember that one. Avicenna argued that even without any sensory input, that person would still be self-aware. Pretty radical idea back then.
Very radical. His work suggests that self-awareness is built in, not just a product of our experiences. A different perspective from Aristotle's focus on the mind-body connection.
Amazing how these different ideas popped up in different cultures, but we're still focused on the same big questions about human consciousness.
Right. And that's what makes exploring these ancient foundations so fascinating. It's like tracing the threads of how our understanding of the mind has evolved over time.
We've covered so much already. From the Greek miracle to the Islamic Golden Age, it feels like we've barely scratched the surface.
You're right. There's still so much to uncover, like the atomic theory of Democritus and the Hippocratics and their contributions to medicine.
We'll be right back to continue this amazing journey through the ancient foundations of psychology. Stick around. And we're back, still digging deep into the roots of psychology. Last time, we explored the Greek miracle and the Islamic Golden Age, seeing how thinkers across cultures grappled with those big questions about the mind. But now, we got to meet a figure whose name is basically synonymous with philosophy, Socrates.
Ah, Socrates.
Yeah.
Truly a game changer. Unlike many of his peers who are obsessed with, grand theories about the universe, Socrates was laser focused on human behavior, morality, the stuff that really matters.
Yeah, and he had this knack for challenging assumptions and making people think critically, using what we now call the Socratic method.
Right, that constant questioning to expose flaws in arguments. I've tried it myself, but I don't think I quite have Socrates' touch.
He wasn't about forcing his own views, but guiding people towards self-discovery. Pretty cool, huh?
Exactly. Socrates believed that true knowledge was already within each person. He saw himself as a kind of catalyst, helping people unlock their own understanding. And, that has huge implications for education, even today.
He was like a philosophical guide, leading people on this journey of intellectual exploration. But here's the thing. Socrates never wrote anything down. So how do we even know what he believed?
That's a great point. Most of what we know about Socrates comes from his students, mainly Plato. It's almost like a philosophical game of telephone, his ideas being passed down and interpreted in different ways. Makes you wonder about how reliable historical accounts really are.
Speaking of Plato, let's get back to him. We already talked about his theory of ideal forms, but what did he have to say about the human psyche?
Well, Plato believed that the psyche or soul was immortal and had three parts: reason, spirit, and appetite. Reason was the top dog, responsible for rational thought and decisions. Spirit was linked to emotions like courage and ambition. And then there's appetite, which, represented our basic urges and desires.
So basically, it's like this constant inner battle. Our logical side trying to keep our emotions and urges in check. Sounds familiar.
Exactly. Plato believed that a harmonious soul with reason and control led to a virtuous and fulfilling life. When those desires and emotions run wild, it creates all sorts of inner conflict.
That's deep. And, this concept of the tripartite soul had a huge influence on Western thought. So ideas about morality, self-control, the whole nature of the human psyche.
Absolutely. We can see echoes of it even in modern psychology, like in theories of personality and motivation. It's pretty amazing how long those ideas have stuck around.
It really is.
Yeah.
But let's not forget about Aristotle, Plato's star pupil, who ended up challenging a lot of his teacher's beliefs.
Right. Aristotle, the master of observation in the physical world. So how did his view of the psyche differ from Plato's?
That's what I'm wondering.
Well, Aristotle believed in a strong connection between the mind and body. He saw the psyche as an integral part of a living organism, not this separate, immortal thing like Plato did. For him, the psyche was responsible for an organism's functions and capabilities, almost like an operating system.
So no ethereal soul floating around. The mind was a part of our physical being. That's a big difference.
It is. And this emphasis on the mind-body connection, well, that's a cornerstone of modern psychology. Think about all the current research on, the gut-brain connection or how stress impacts our physical health. Those ideas have roots in Aristotle's view of the psyche.
It's mind-blowing how these ancient thinkers laid the groundwork for so much of what we know about psychology today. They didn't have brain scanners or fancy research methods, but their insights are still incredibly relevant.
They were true pioneers asking those big questions and forcing us to think critically about consciousness, perception, the whole human experience.
We've explored Plato and Aristotle, those titans of philosophy, but our journey through the ancient foundations of psychology isn't over yet.
Oh, there's more to uncover.
Hey.
Next time, we're diving into the mind-blowing atomic theory of Democritus and exploring what the Hippocratics contributed to medicine. Get ready for some serious ahead-of-their-time ideas.
All right, we're back and ready to wrap up our epic journey through the ancient foundations of psychology. We've traveled from the Greek miracle to the Islamic golden age, and now we're digging into some hidden gems that might just blow your mind.
And we're going way back to ancient Greece to meet a thinker who, well, his theory was so ahead of its time, it took centuries for science to catch up.
Okay, you've got my attention. Who are we talking about?
His name was Democritus, and he's often called the laughing philosopher. He believed that, happiness came from living a simple, joyful life. But he was also a deep thinker, someone who dared to imagine the universe in a way no one else had.
So what was this groundbreaking theory that made him laugh?
Well, Democritus came up with the idea that everything, all matter, is made up of tiny, indivisible particles. He called them atoms. And he believed that these atoms were always in motion, colliding and combining to create everything we see and experience.
Wait, atoms? Like the building blocks of matter we learned about in school? He figured that out over 2,000 years ago.
Yep. Pretty amazing, right? Especially considering he didn't have microscopes or any of the fancy tools we use today to study matter at that level.
It makes you wonder, the power of thought and reasoning. He must have been incredibly sharp to come up with something so fundamental just by observing the world around him.
It really is. He figured that if you just kept dividing matter into smaller and smaller pieces, eventually you'd get to a point where you couldn't divide it anymore. That's where you get atoms, those ultimate building blocks of reality.
But his theory wasn't widely accepted until much later, was it?
Yeah, a lot of groundbreaking ideas kind of face that, right? They're just too ahead of their time.
So what made Democritus's atomic theory so revolutionary back then?
Well, think about it. Back then, most people believed that the world was created and controlled by, gods or mystical forces. But Democritus, he was looking for a purely physical explanation. He wanted to understand the mechanics of the universe. And that challenged the entire worldview at the time.
Yeah, it really did. He kind of planted a seed that took centuries to fully blossom. Amazing how some ideas can be so far ahead of their time, but it also shows us that it's important to stay open-minded. Who knows what incredible ideas we might be overlooking right now just because they seem too out there.
Right. We got to keep asking questions and be willing to challenge what we think we know. Okay, so we've covered philosophy, math, and even physics with Democritus and his atoms. But what about the practical stuff, like health and medicine? Did any ancient thinkers make contributions there?
You're talking about the Hippocratics, right?
Yeah.
The doctors who followed the teachings of Hippocrates. We touched on them earlier, but I'm definitely ready for a deeper dive. What was so revolutionary about their approach to medicine?
Well, the Hippocratics were the first to really separate medicine from, superstition and religious beliefs. They are convinced that diseases had natural causes, not supernatural ones. It was a huge shift in thinking.
So no more blaming evil spirits for a broken leg or a bad cough? That's progress.
Haha, right. Instead of trying to appease the gods, they started focusing on understanding how the body actually works. They emphasized careful observation of symptoms, getting detailed patient histories, and treating the whole person, not just the disease. Sound familiar?
It's like the foundation of how we practice medicine today.
Exactly. They even understood how important a healthy lifestyle is for preventing illness. Remember that famous quote, "Let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food." It's often attributed to Hippocrates himself. They were advocating for healthy eating over 2,000 years ago.
That's incredible. So much of their wisdom still holds true today. But they also had some theories that, well, haven't stood the test of time, haven't they?
You're thinking of the humoral theory, right? Where they believed that illnesses were caused by an imbalance of bodily fluids. Yeah, we know now that it's not exactly right. But it's interesting to see how they were trying to make sense of the body as a system striving for balance. It really laid the groundwork for a more scientific understanding of diseases.
It's amazing how much these ancient thinkers contributed to so many fields that are still relevant today. Philosophy, mathematics, physics, medicine, and it all connects back to our understanding of the mind. It's like we've been on a quest to discover the roots of psychology.
And that's what makes exploring these ancient foundations so rewarding. By looking back at these early ideas, we get a much deeper appreciation for how our current understanding of the mind has evolved over centuries. It's been a long and fascinating journey.
It really has. This deep dive has been truly enlightening. We've met some incredible minds, explored groundbreaking theories, and uncovered some timeless wisdom.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure sharing this journey with you. Remember, this is just the beginning. There are countless other stories, ideas, and connections waiting to be discovered out there.
So keep exploring, keep questioning, keep that curiosity burning bright. You never know what amazing insights you might stumble upon. That's it for our deep dive into the ancient foundations of psychology. Until next time, Keep those minds engaged and never stop learning.